Session 8. The Story of Two Regions. The Eastern Partnership meets the Balkans. Moderator: Natalisa Banadze, Ambassador, Head of Mission of Georgia to the European Union. Speakers: Gabriela Cretu, Chairperson of the Committee on European Affairs of the Senate of Romania. Zoran Jankovic, State Secretary at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Montenegro. Sokol Dejel, Deputy Minister for Europe and Foreign Affairs of Albania. Michael Emerson, Senior Fellow, Center for European Policy Studies, CEPS, Brussels.
Okay, thank you very much, everybody. Not only is it extremely difficult to talk as one of the last panels, but it is after lunch, so thanks everybody for the dedication and for coming to listen to us. I think we have a very interesting panel. We have two regions that have their own interesting stories to tell, and I want to kick off this discussion by saying in a couple words why these two regions and why have we put them together. First of all, one thing that you probably all know, these are some of the similar legacies. Both regions have experienced authoritarian communist rule. Countries in both regions, after the collapse of the Soviet Union, have experienced both intrastate and interstate conflicts. Both have experience and culture and politics of being on the crossroads of different influences, particularly of Eastern and Western influences. And this has, in many ways, made us a playground for great power competition. And finally, some of us from Eastern Partnership, namely the three DCFTA countries and many of the Balkan countries, all of the Western Balkans, have ambitions and aspirations to become EU members. So this is something we share, but you are, of course, much more advanced on this path. And here your experience, lessons learned, can be both instructive and, I think, inspiring for us. So the purpose of this panel really is to start this interaction, to begin the brainstorming on some of the common issues that we face, and maybe take it further then to the capitals and perhaps even to Brussels. This is important for the main theme of this conference, which is Eastern Partnership, because it's 10-year anniversary, and this conference is dedicated to it. We are celebrating Eastern Partnership, and we believe we have a lot to celebrate. But at the same time, this is the opportunity to think about the next 10 years of this initiative. Where is it going? How is it going to make us closer to the EU and closer to each other? So I would like to ask our speakers, and I will start with you, Gabriela, because Romania has been the presidency, holding presidency for the first time of the European Union, and both regions have been your priority. You have hosted many events, including the 10th anniversary of Eastern Partnership in Brussels. So if you can start with your introductory remarks, and then your colleagues would follow, and then I come back with questions.
Thank you very much. If you allow me, I would focus my first comments less on Balkans or Eastern Partnership. My focus would be more on where these regions meet or would like to meet. That means European Union. Adding some Romanian experience after 12 years already of membership, and after, as you just said, a recent, successfully, many say, closed already first presidency of the Council of the Union. I was the coordinating person of the special committee during this period, so you could forgive me for being a bit tired, but I hope challenging as well. It is a kind of Romanian interpretation of the relation between European Union and a country still outside the Union, but interested in joining or at least in closing its relation with. Because I like to clarify something since the beginning. When speaking about the European way, we don't speak about all these countries belonging to a geographical or historical entity. They do belong. We speak about an economic and political entity having its own rules, its own interests, its own realities, and why not, many times, its own weaknesses. So, since the beginning, speaking about European Union and these relations, I want to stress that I am myself, not all Romanians, but myself, a European federalist. So, still dreaming for a united Europe. There is no drop of Euroscepticism in my critical approach, perhaps. If there are many members of the European Union now in this room, no elephant in the room, they would say, what a utopia. But yes, but I'm a realist utopian, trying to make the same diagnosis, more or less, as the Hungarian minister yesterday here. But I have a quite different solution for the state of play of the European Union now. And a totally opposite one, if you want to say so. Because we want to build a social Europe and a Europe of citizens. Why? Because a Europe of national member states we've had before and resulted in the two bloodiest wars in the history of humankind as a result of their rivalries. Many decades after have been needed for reconstruction. And we don't have to forget this. I cannot help myself, for this reason, to voice my uneasiness concerning an aspect of our debates by now. Very good debates, but in spite of blaming and complaining about a revival of geopolitical thinking and being worried about the fate of democracy, the majority of participants yesterday and even today spoke on geopolitical terms, including the reason for choosing the European way was, for many, geopolitical. That means speaking mostly about relation between states and how to enter or getting rid of spheres of influence. And my feeling, not my feeling, my conviction is that we need a political approach, not a geopolitical one. Politics is about people and policies. And about values, of course, because everybody spoke about values. But in democracies, in a compulsory way, they are different. Democracy is just a framework for trading off peacefully between different views about how to organize our societies. From a political point of view, for example, I would contradict the President Tusk statement yesterday when saying that the collapse of the Soviet Union was a blessing. Geopolitically, yes. Politically, it was so painful for so many that we cannot speak in these terms. And after, if nobody could deny this, mostly conflicts, differences, real, artificial, or even imaginary, got importance. And look at both region and the relations between the current member states in that region. All this replaced a weak, but however real solidarity there. For the European Union, because I said I would speak about European Union, is the same, because it is the solidarity or competition, the main manner of action now within the European Union and between European Union and the others. It is freedom or equality, the value which comes firstly. It's an individual person or a community interest. We have to discuss. We cannot find a common answer without ignoring the main agents of democracy, which are citizens and the parties, political parties. They have different views on how to build Europe, on how to deal with the enlargement. If these ideological differences are weaker in the latest years, it is because a very big change, yes, has occurred. Those leading the world now are less and less our governments and more the markets and the financial markets. This is a very delicate trade-off between democracy and the markets. We have to save democracy now. I suppose it is our main issue because actually somebody talked yesterday about imperialism. The current imperialism has no nationality, has money, and a new reality, virtual reality, which can be used against democracy and has been already used. I would continue next.
Thank you very much. New imperialism, virtual imperialism as well. Very interesting. We can pick this up afterwards, but I would like to ask Zoran first to come in with your introduction and do keep it short, please, so that we can have a discussion afterwards.
Okay, thank you. I'll try. Thank you for your introductory words, and you already said that our two initiatives had some similarity and some differences, and of course, before I start to tell something about that, just to explain, because 2 days I have opportunity to hear a lot about Georgia, about all Eastern Partnership, and now I decide to change my approach about that, because it means that it's not necessary to once again repeat that everything we have heard previous days, but just a short introduction. What is Western Balkan group? I think it was very useful to form this group, because it's sometimes, if you analyze that it became 5 of 6 was in former Yugoslavia, like one state plus Albania. After that, 2 of former Yugoslavia state, Slovenia and Croatia, already became European Union members, and now we are on different approach to the European Union. Some specific question that we have in our region, especially political question between Serbia and Kosovo, make some troubles in looking all area to become a member of European Union, because the Kosovo was not recognized by 2 countries, Bosnia and Herzegovina and Serbia, but at the same time we had some other problems with North Macedonia. It was solved in very good manner, and open the position of North Macedonia to become, first of all, very soon NATO members, and after that to open negotiation with we believe with Albania and North Macedonia. In the meantime, negotiation process with Montenegro and Serbia is ongoing. We open 32 chapters. It's remain only 1 chapter to be open. And Serbia opened 17 chapters, and we believe that it's now time for closing chapter, what is the biggest problem than open, but anyway, opening chapter is a sign of some progress in our countries. And it means that we think that it's eagerly worth to see the region like one group of country, and to try to find a solution for reconciliation, for negotiation, for connectivity, and of course to solve the security problem, because without solving the problem of borders and other security problems, it's for European Union it's difficult to accept troubles it means that it's the same in your region. That it's first necessary to solve the problems, and after that and if we start to negotiate, we will decide the individual approach and so-called regatta approach. It means that it's based on the individual merits, and we think that it's a good for country to be encouraged to negotiate, to closing the chapter, and to be front runner, as you said, in this process. In the meantime, we are very active in regional initiatives, because regional initiatives always include some countries for European Union, like Adriatic Ionia Initiative, like Central European Initiative. Western Balkan Fund we organized in help with the Visegrad Group countries, and we think that it's a communication inside of regional initiatives. It's make atmosphere better between country itself of region and between countries of European Union and our country. And this is probably for opening that I would like to say, like introductory, and if you have some additional question, I am able to do it.
I certainly will. Thank you very much. Regatta approach, we can pick this up later, but I would like to move now to Sokol. Does that approach fit Albania as well? And if you could also tell a little bit on some of the challenges and similarities that the two regions have. We are, I think, quite comparable in many ways. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Natalie, and thank you for organizing this very interesting dialogue between the two regions. We are very interested in this dialogue, and that's why we are here. We have many similarities, many things in common, as you said, both historically, culturally, and with some of the countries in this region, we share this very important EU accession aspiration, Euro-Atlantic aspiration with some countries. This means that our countries are involved in very similar processes of transposition of the European Union norms and rules, management of the EU financial assistance, which means that technically, administratively, legally, there is a lot of room for a very useful exchange of experience, of lessons learned between the two regions. But in my view, the most important link is political. What I mean is that the success of the EU enlargement process in our region, the success of the EU as transformative power, is also important for the Eastern Partnership region. We need to see a credible, tangible accession process in the Western Balkans, and this is an important encouragement, I think, also for the Eastern Partnership countries. Why am I saying tangible, credible accession perspective? Because there is a room for a lot of strengthening there in terms of credibility of the accession process in the Western Balkans, on both sides. We need to strengthen our reform efforts, but these reform efforts are difficult, and they require this important, crucial anchor support that is a credible perspective of EU accession. This means that when the candidate country has delivered on the conditions unanimously decided by the EU member states, when the Commission considers that this country has delivered on fulfilling the conditions, the EU must deliver on the next step. This is important for domestic reforms, as I said, in our countries. It's important also for the stability of our region. I mean, unfortunately, another thing we have in common is that geopolitical competition is back also in our region. I mean, it is much more pronounced here, but it's present also in the Western Balkans. In this sense, the EU perspective in the Western Balkans is important. The success of the EU in the Western Balkans is important. It's important that our countries in the Western Balkans see no alternative to the EU perspective. This is important also for our stability, for good neighborly relations. So there is this important political link that I think we should underline.
Thank you very much. And now I would like to ask Michael for the concluding introductory remarks. I know I have left you as the last speaker because I know you have looked at the comparison of the two regions quite closely. So if you could share with us your findings, and if you could tell us more about how can we forge the cooperation, what are there commonalities between us, and is this in the interest of both regions and in the EU in particular?
Thank you very much, Natalia. It's been my great pleasure and privilege over the last few years to have been following both the Balkans and Eastern Europe for many years. In fact, in the last year, in my research center, SEPS in Brussels, we undertook a very detailed comparison, line by line, if you like, chapter by chapter, of the performance and the quality of democracy and economic approximation on EU law of all of the Balkans and the three DCFTA cases. The documentary basis for this is available publicly at our website, which is 3dcftas.eu. 3dcftas.eu. Okay, there's chapter and verse in there in great detail, and the bottom line is these two groups of countries are qualitatively comparable, both with respect to their so-called front runners and their so-called non-front runners. Now, the big difference politically is, of course, membership perspective in the Balkans and not for Eastern Europe. But here's the paradox. The East Europeans have basically jumped ahead compared to their starting point. In fact, in their association agreements with DCFTAs, what they have done is effectively have agreed with the EU, now I use enlargement talk. They've basically opened all 30 chapters. They haven't closed them, but have opened them with legal commitments to get in line with the EU law in all respects. So the paradox here is that the membership perspective for the Balkans hasn't actually proved to be the magic bullet as of now, whereas the absence of membership perspectives has not impeded important progress in Eastern Europe. So this would lead me, as an analyst of this landscape, to downplay the functional, if you like, behavioral, transformative significance of membership perspective, yes or no. It's very important, but keep a perspective in the way that I've mentioned. Okay, that's the first point. Now, to bring the story up to date on the consolidation of democratic institutions, to use the language in the introduction here of the program. This last months have been extremely important and indeed even exciting for democracy in Eastern Europe. In Ukraine with the Zelensky election, Moldova with the change of government and the movement into exile of the previously ruling oligarch, and also in Georgia, where there's vibrant civil society pressure, which has led to a commitment to change the electoral system for the forthcoming 2020 elections. So if I look at that landscape compared to the political landscape, the political dynamics in the Balkans, I would say in Eastern Europe we have three vibrant political processes. They're not mature in terms of high-quality democracy in all cases, but there's really genuine and vibrant democratic processes, whereas I don't really see much of that in the Balkans. Maybe in Northern Macedonia in particular, maybe in some respects Albania, but I would certainly not for the biggest of the Balkans, Serbia, who has a leading role for various obvious reasons. One would not describe that as a vibrant democracy. Now, the third question is on the card and in your remarks, Natalia. Should there be links between the two groups? My take on that is, first of all, yes, basically, but it's a yes plus or yes and. I mean, the first obvious question is that the Western Balkans and the three DCFTA cases should proceed to complete their matrix of mutual free trade agreements, coupled to, very importantly, the very technically complicated matter, but important matter, of common pan-Euromed rules of origin. So all of these countries can pool together with pan-Euromed consistent free trade areas, which gives the opportunity for diagonal accumulation in trade with the European Union. But that's not all, because this leads into the question of these two groups in the wider European space between the EU and all of the rest of non-EU Europe, which is still interested, with or without membership perspectives, in deep integration with the EU. That includes the European Economic Area with Norway, the Balkans, EFTAs, and with some question marks, Brexit UK and Turkey. So this is a vast area, and what we see happening in practice, despite the political segmentation in Brussels of these different groups and individual countries, we see an increasing commonality in the economic instruments that are deployed in all of them. I go beyond the free trade areas and the rules of origin into the transport networks, into energy networks, product standards, visa-free travel, EU agencies and programs. So there's a vast set which is basically applicable to all of them. And so the question for the next Commission and next leadership of the European Union can be whether to try to get synergies, pull this all together. Interestingly, for Georgia, we listened right at the beginning of this conference to the contribution by President Zurabashvili, and in fact, in her itemization of thinking out of the box, as you said, in fact, she was listing all of these ingredients for Georgia, which, however, are open to be ingredients for a wider European space. And then my final remark then is, if you look at that as an interesting opportunity for development of the course of the next year, where does that leave the accession processes? Well, my answer to that is quite simple and straightforward. The accession processes proceed case by case on their own merits, and what I've been describing is not a substitute for the accession process, it's a parallel process. And these wider European integration efforts will be generally helpful for all. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Michael. I would like to come back to you straight away about this point on transformative power. It has always been considered that accession is much more effective as a transformative, gives more effective tools to the European Union to exercise its transformative power than, for example, association, because there is a clear carrot at the end, and at the end of the day, it also gives the EU greater leverage. But you say, and I tend to agree with you on that, that the latest evidence suggests that association can also be quite effective. It depends on us, it depends on the local circumstances, and so on. But still, I would like to ask you, is there anything from the accession process that can be imported into the association one to maximize the transformation? Are there instruments, are there mechanisms, perhaps the same type of regatta approach in drafting the progress reports? You say DCFTA has a lot of commonalities, so they are the kind of chapters as well, and our obligations under DCFTA are comparable to those that are taken by candidate countries, but the instruments, the support, the resources are not exactly comparable. What do you say about that? And then I will let you, Gabriela, come in to respond.
On your first question on the transformative power, I think what we observe is the following. In the case of the Big Bang enlargement of 2004-2005, most of those cases were clear stories that we were motivated by the accession process. So there, the transformative process worked. That's approximately true. With respect to the Balkans, with this long, drawn-out, inconclusive, there's been a kind of enlargement fatigue process has set in, and the leverage of this so-called transformative process seems to have weakened. And on the contrary, let us say, the associated cases have found the energy and interest into progressing. And then that is why is the case that the 3 DCFTA cases have advanced. My reading of these 3 countries is there's a very profound societal demand and pressure for clean democracy. Don't need to go into the detail of that. That is what's driving it. Now, that clean democracy is associated in public perceptions with European standards of democracy, and that is a jump that the people can make in their minds. We want our home democracy to be decent democracy, like they have down there in Europe. And that is a shortcut that the people can make without going into the intricacies of association agreements or accession chapters.
Thank you. Please, I can see that you are eager to comment.
So we have to transform altogether, European Union included, I mean. The European Union is a moving process. It's not something we had, and it is not completed yet. It is the best place to live still in the world. I am a federalist, I have to stress this. It has welfare state, peace for 70 years, but however, we need to transform European Union as well, and you, Western Balkans countries, Eastern Partnership countries, it is not Eastern Partnership in this side, in the room, you have to be a part of this process. I do believe that it could be your contribution, because you have still this, how to say, a capacity of seeing what we have already forgotten the good parts of the European Union, to perceive how good it is to live in a peaceful society, to have public services, public goods, to enjoy freedoms, etc., etc. Because for many, almost those born within the European Union, older member states, it's something they got, not they haven't struggled for. So, from this point of view, I live like 20 years ago when Romania started its process. It was something like good faith, weak knowledge about the concrete mechanisms and problems, high expectations, and somehow a kind of blind obedience concerning some policies, especially neoliberal policies. Not all of them have been observed and implemented in our countries. So our conclusion, our lessons learned was that actually, one, the Union could be taken as a reference, not as a solution for domestic problems. It is not a solution in short term, at least for all our domestic problems. On the contrary, in short term and medium term, sometimes creates complication because of difficulties of integration. Secondly, Union is a moving horizon, not a target, a defined goal to achieve. Now, starting your preparation, you have to be prepared for the European Union in 2030 or 2040 perhaps, and taking into account that the realities are changing as well, and we have to adapt and to be able to anticipate not only the way of the European Union, but to have a global view of change. Thirdly, a successful integration in the European Union needs avoiding setting up as an objective to live in a welfare state, having something like in Western developed Europe, but implementing in our societies, in our countries, a kind of third country model based on exports, cheap labor force, and privatization of everything. Because there is a moment where actually our governments and our states don't have something to offer as public services, goods, citizens' needs from us, I mean. So we have to work as well in our internal convergence, not only in converging with European policies and European direction. This was my point.
I would like to pick up on the changing Europe a little bit later, but first, going back to the scary question of enlargement. It's not only 10th anniversary of Eastern Partnership this year, it's also 15th anniversary of the first enlargement. And previously, well, we know collapse of the Soviet Union and of Yugoslavia has in some ways propelled the EU onto the center stage. Perhaps more by default than by design, it became the main player in the region, and it could transform these countries according to its own model. And enlargement as a policy was designed, and it was considered to be as one of the most successful foreign policy initiatives of the European Union, a kind of domestication of foreign policy as these countries slowly changed and became members. Today, the attitude towards enlargement is much more mixed. it's ambivalent at best, and in some European capitals we can say it's also quite hostile. And my question to you, and I would like to start with Zoran and Sokol, because I'm sure you encounter that in your dealings with Brussels and with some European capitals. What do you think that is damaging enlargement? What is giving it this bad reputation, and what can we do about it?
Thank you. Yes, this is an often question in our country. Is it enlargement fatigue? It's usually a question that you can heard, or whether we receive the messages that the enlargement policy is closed, or is it is it a door open for next enlargement? Of course, we are aware that enlargement policy is one of the best policy of European Union, and we are aware that it's a lot of other problems in European Union itself, like Brexit. Now we faced with a new election, and I would like to comment that from our point of view, the result of elections are good, and the first messages that we receive from potential candidates for European Commission is encouraging, and we believe that we will continue with this, probably not so fast like we started, and from our point of view, we do not run to the date. We believe that every step forward, opening chapter and closing some chapter, is a step forward for a better life of our citizens and fulfillment of standards of European Union. And if you are posing the question on that level, we do not worry about our future. Of course, all society are divided about that. We received the report 1 month ago, and commenting this report in the news, you will see different approach, whether progress is enough progress or is less progress, or did we fulfill our expectation or not. From our point of view, we do not see any danger for future enlargement, and we believe that should continue in this manner. We believe that in some countries, as you said, it's not popular to talk about that, and it's some difficulties to ensure some countries. But sometimes what is challenging, how to explain the fact or perceptions. If we talk about perceptions about fight against corruption, human rights trafficking, or freedom of media, it's always challenging how to prove that it's some progress. And I think it is some challenge to prove that it's progress ongoing, and that we deserve to continue our enlargement policy.
Sokol, I would like to hear from you as well, and if you could also add, because I know Albania, North Macedonia were expecting some good news, but there is a delay on this, and you know, you can say that Western Balkans have been in the waiting room for a long time, and I'm curious, what is the atmosphere in this waiting room? Is the delay feeding Euroscepticism at home? How does it affect domestic politics? Because that is relevant for us too. We face Russian propaganda, and in that context, it's important to show progress.
If you would allow me to also go back to your previous question about the explanation of lack of enthusiasm for enlargement in some EU member states. Well, you are asking an extremely difficult question, because you are asking us to explain populism in rational terms, which is almost impossible. I mean, the lack of enthusiasm for enlargement has got very little to do with how the enlargement process works, with how it worked for previous waves of enlargement, including the neighbor Romania. Yes, there are challenges in the new member states of the European Union. But the question is, what would these challenges look like if these countries were not in the European Union? In relation to current enlargement countries, yes, there are challenges in our region. But let us remember where our region comes from. What our region looked like only a few years ago and what it looks like today. Yes, there are challenges in our region, but what would this region look like without the transformative power, as you said, of the European Union? And this leads me to your other question, the mood about enlargement at home in Albania, in other countries in the region. The support for EU accession is very, very high in Albania because it is, as Michael said, it is a synonym for modernizing transformation. And this, in the public opinion, is linked very closely to the perspective of EU accession. The enthusiasm is very high. It should be maintained high, so high by delivering on the credibility on the enlargement process. I mean, I don't have the crystal ball to say what will be the reaction of the Albanian public opinion to another postponement of the opening of accession negotiations. I have fears. I have fears that there will be disappointment in relation to the credibility of the future perspective of EU accession. And this has consequences. There are, as you said, very difficult reforms that are not undertaken for the sake of the European Union, for improving the life of our citizens, but they are difficult, costly in the short term. And this support that the link to EU accession provides is very important. So it's important for domestic reforms, it's important for regional stability. I mean, the Albanians see their future in the European Union. This is why they are not nationalists. This is why they have not played the pan-Albanian card in the region, because this is not what we want. We want the European model, a European future.
Thank you very much. Michael and Gabriela, I'll let you comment on this, but I would like to give you an add-on question, which would be the last one from me, and then we open to the audience. We often talk about the transformation, about the benefits of the enlargement for us, for those countries who are about to join or who did join. But the question today, as we are facing increasingly difficult and skeptical audiences, is to also make a strong case that there is a benefit for the EU in the enlargement. And I would like to ask you to think about what is it there for the EU? What are the benefits that the enlargement into Balkans could bring to the EU and perhaps also to the three DCFTA countries? Thanks.
Easy questions. On your prior question, what is holding back the enlargement process viewed from the EU side, quite apart from the technicalities of the chapter-by-chapter process? I would say, well, first we have to recognize that the member states are in different camps. I mean, some are clearly pro-enlargement, full stop. And others are more reticent, to say the least. Now, of the more reticent states, I would say the principal, as it were, objectively understandable argument is the fear for the governance of the EU, which recently jumped from 15 to 28 member states, and with the 6 Balkans and the 3 applicants from, or potential applicants from Eastern Europe, there would be another jump to 35. How is the process of negotiation in the Council of Ministers going to work? They're afraid of that. Now, there is an escape route from the real problem there, which is in the distinction between, to use a well-known expression, avant-garde group versus core Europe. I mean, Euro, Schengen, defense, these are both restricted clubs for not all member states. And so that avant-garde group are free, more or less, in an ordered way, to deepen integration on certain strategically important sectors. And that leaves what's left. Well, core Europe is basically the institutions and this vast mass of single market legislation and other things. Now, one could envisage a conversation with the most skeptical member states saying, well, yes, we see the problem, but if you want to have a political structure that allows you and like-minded to lead the process deeper in certain vital sectors, well, okay, go ahead. The framework exists for this within EU practice, but at the same time, why don't you say core Europe, that could be more easily opened for extended membership. So relax over membership of core Europe and get your reinsurance, which they are looking for. This is a reality, what they're looking for, through the avant-garde technique. Okay, what are the benefits of this enlargement? Well, it's absolutely clear. I mean, peace and stability in our Eastern Balkans and indeed in Eastern Europe. These are fragile areas geopolitically, politically, and this would be a major stabilizing benefit, both in terms of the domestic political process in these countries and in relation to the elephant who's not in the room so far, which is called Russia. Okay, so we need a stronger structure to resist Russian attempts to basically undermine either the European Union or democratic processes in general, or both.
Thank you, Gabriela.
So, as you know, my country is among those supporting, at least keeping the doors open for other countries in the European Union. In the same time, Romanians are among those keeping in mind the difficulties of the economic model implemented in the European Union in the last 2-3 decades, because we entered a year before the crisis started, and you have imagined that not only the positive effects were there, but as well deep pain on our citizens. So from this point of view, you have to understand that it's not about you when we speak about fatigue. It's about European Union itself. It has to reform together with everybody. And I recently read a book written by a social democrat colleague from Germany with the title, Integrate Firstly Ourselves, because huge inequalities have been created, and there is a real kind of unrest in the European society, which is a new reality. When we started the process of joining, it was a different European Union with more solidarity and more social European Union. Now, unfortunately, but we could find solution, we have to find solution. But I'd like you to understand, not to feel a kind of frustration because of this postponement. I'm sorry, I'm really tired. After some 200 conferences organized during our presidency. We would try to keep open doors. But in the same time, you have to understand that the European Union was driven somehow by the same geopolitical approach when dealing with Western Balkans, so the window of opportunity many speak now is very much related with the internal domestical issues European Union has to deal with, and less with the merits of one or another country in the region.
Thank you very much. Now, I've put on my glasses and I hope to spot the questions. There we go. I see 2 hands already. Mr. Baramidze, you can start. You know the drill. Introduce yourself and keep it short.
Georgi Baramidze, representing United National Movement and United Opposition. First of all, my question to dear colleague from Romania. You mentioned that there is no nationality to this new imperialism. But we have Georgia occupied, we have Ukraine occupied, we have in Moldova Russian occupying forces. So what kind of occupation is this and what kind of imperialism is this, if you can describe? And next question to Mr. Emerson. We have an EU policy, clear policy, Balkans first, and kind of Eastern Europe, God knows when. What's the rationale behind these policies? Certainly it's not fair to the countries like Ukraine, Moldova, Georgia, if we can meet the standards. Why should we wait, for instance, with due respect, Bosnia-Herzegovina, which might stuck in this problems that they have quite a time. We are Europeans, we are fundamentally Europeans, and nobody can deny that, yes, association agreement is a stimul for us to move forward. We would, as a democratic nation, civilized nation, would make our reforms anyway without any perspective for EU membership, but even without association, probably. But membership perspective, nobody can deny it's a very strong stimul.
Thank you.
So why should European Union deny European nations, freedom-loving European nations, this very important stimul? Thank you.
Thank you. You did 2 questions. I take 1 more and then back to the panelists.
Thank you. Georgi Gotev, Euractiv, I'm a journalist. I'm sorry that Mrs. Kretsu is tired because my question also goes to you. I really didn't understand. I mean, yesterday Council President Tusk got massive applause when he contradicted Russian President Putin, saying that it was not a catastrophe, the collapse of communism was a blessing, and you appeared to question Mr. Tusk's statement, so if you can elaborate on this. And also, if you can say, taking as an example Romania and your own party, which is at loggerheads very often with the European Commission so far, and the many issues of corruption and so on, isn't this the real reason why many in the European Union are not really hot about enlargement? And I can say the same about other countries I know very well. I can say the same about Bulgaria. But as you represent Romania, I'm asking you, isn't this the biggest problem of all? Thank you.
Thank you. Please.
I didn't deny the very existence of conflicts between states, of frozen or active conflicts. It was another idea about the European Union. European Union doesn't face now this kind of classical conflict. But instead, there is something European Union has to face, is facing actually. And I repeat both of them. The power of transnational corporations trying to control or undermine the classical institutions of democracy because of tax havens, for example, because of transfer prices within the European Union, because of not paying taxes, because of many other issues. This was my idea, not denying the very existence of wars or conflicts between states. And the second big challenge is the new reality, virtual reality. We don't have political control of it. It is a very peculiar reality, totally private, controlled only by the owners of the digital companies and their clients. And they started in intervening in our democratic mechanisms. They did it already. In our countries, within the European Union, there are books written about the influence in German elections, in UK Brexit referendum, etc. It is this aspect I wanted to stress, and that the European Union cannot continue in blaming the others. A small country could say that, well, because of, I don't know which country or a huge power, we are in trouble. But European Union, it is a huge entity having a market of 500 million persons and 28 still member states and open doors for the others. European Union has to wake up and decide for itself. It is this my view.
And your comments on Mr. President Tusk's suggestion, because on that is also sort of socially driven rather than political.
It is the difference between geopolitical point of view, and from geopolitical point of view, he was right. Yeah?
But you're talking about the
but
social
from
costs
political point of view, speaking about citizens, how kind of blessing you could find in the fact that in the next 2 decades, the life expectation decrease with years in all former... it's a blessing to have a democratic society, yes.
Well, there were social costs and there are political opportunities.
Yeah. It's so, another point of view. It's another manner of... No, I do believe that you want to understand differently my sayings. Yeah? It was difficult in Eastern Germany. It was about Eastern Germany, the book I reminded here. It was not about Putin. It was not about Soviet Union. It was about a big dream of Germans to reunite. But that unification was painful as well because of social issues. And what I want to say to you, not because we want to teach you lessons, because our experience is relevant for you, is that the fact that we have to empower our citizens, firstly, because otherwise they could be under control of other forces, as our friend here tries to suggest.
Yes, I see. You're talking about the social cost of transformation, which we're very happy, but there were, of course, political opportunities that cannot be denied. So we are the ones who want to take this opportunity, and is it fair that this is not possible for us? That was one of the questions addressed to you, Michael.
Yes, on the second half of the first question, with respect to Ukraine, Moldova, and Georgia, what is the rationale for denial of membership perspective? Well, there's no principled rationale to it. The European Union, as you, I'm sure, really understand, is a complex of multiple democracies, but this enlargement process is subject to unanimity blockage potential. And so when there is vocal resistance by even a minority of member states, this prevails in the decision-making process. However, this does not mean that the internal political dynamics over the question are not alive and potentially may move on in due course, as I mentioned a moment ago with reference to avant-garde and core Europe. So my message is, first of all, understand where the resistances are and the nature of the resistances. The nature of the resistance is about the worry about over-expansion, and the response to that, you've got to take, you know, a realistic historical perspective. I remember, I can't remember what the year was, but I remember when the Spanish accession was approaching. Spanish succession was sometime in the previous century. I can't remember what year it was. But I remember talking to an experienced diplomat in Brussels at that time who said to me, Spanish accession will never be agreed. Berlin will never agree. He said. Okay, so something changed. So something may change here also. But the important point for the three aspirants for membership's perspective in Eastern Europe is stick to the business of getting good economic and political governance for its own right and for yourselves, and let the evidence accumulate as to the extent of the illogicality of this position.
Thank you very much. I see one hand. Are there any more? Please introduce yourself, and here, I'll give you mine.
Thank you, Georg Andelaki, Georgian Parliament. I'd like to contradict my colleague from opposition a little bit, but also agree with him. Yes, Georgia should be given a perspective while also scrutinized. But I think there is, while of course corruption is a serious problem in Western Balkans, there is one advantage that some of these countries have as opposed to Georgia. Georgia still, as a society, as a country, still has to demonstrate that it's capable of altering governments through elections in a civilized way. That happened in history of this region, that happened only once, in 2012, when a strong incumbent lost and conceded. The transition was smooth and civilized. But of course, as we know from the theory of democratization, this thing has to happen twice, at least. So Georgia as a society has yet to prove that it's capable of changing governments in a civilized way without cataclysms. Thank you. That's just a quick point. Thank you.
Question? No, I have one. The last panel in the morning talked about connectivity. And I would like to bring in something more practical. I know political discussions are more excited, but still. The chair in my position said that, you know, the airline ticket between Ukraine and Georgia is much more expensive than between the UK and Georgia. And I know Balkans face the same difficulties. They are very short routes, but you can't take them. You have to do long detours. There have been some decisions to improve the situation. There has been famous Berlin process in place. I would like to ask you, how do you assess it? And is there something that we could emulate, perhaps, when thinking about the future development of Eastern Partnership?
Thank you. Yes, it brings me on the some question that I open. It's first of all our interest to be connected with our neighbor countries, and of course to be connected with the European Union countries. First of all, through regional initiatives. And we have some first benefit of that. Of course, we find that initiative for Germany to establish Berlin process is very worthy and fruitful for us. And just summit that was in Poznan proved the possibilities to improve our cooperation and especially to open the projects that are interesting for our people. We used to say that Montenegro is destination that it's not easy to reach, even from this part of Europe that they are very near. First of all, because of closest for low-cost companies. Last year, we opened the first low-cost companies, and because of other infrastructure, road infrastructure. We started 2 years ago the first highway in our countries, and we believe that we will have next year the first 40 kilometers. But through this Berlin process cooperation, the highway from Croatia through Bosnia and Herzegovina, through Montenegro to Albania is involved in this project. And we expect first high-level involvement of European funds and European partners to solve this problem and make connectivity in the right way to connect Western Europe with the South Europe or Southeast Europe. And I think that it's the big benefit for our citizens and the countries as well.
Anything to add, Sokol?
Well, the emulation of the connectivity agenda in this region is already happening, I understand. Earlier today there was this discussion about the extension of the EU's 10E networks to this region, so it is happening. So rather than on intra-regional connectivity, I would like to insist also on inter-regional connectivity. This is very important. Our two regions are becoming an important corridor for energy, for example. The integration of South Caucasian pipeline with the Trans-Anatolian pipeline and the Trans-Adriatic pipeline, which means this brings our two regions, an energy corridor from the Caspian Sea to the Mediterranean and to the European Union. So this inter-regional connectivity is very important in my view.
Thank you very much. And one final question for all the panelists to conclude. I'm told that I need to finish sharply. If you were to give one advice to us, perhaps Ukraine, Moldova, what would that be? Should we be patient? Should we wait for a better weather in Brussels? Or shall we file an application tomorrow?
Apply application. It's always good to start. But anyway, I talked in the beginning, the regional approach and the individual approach. And since I think that it's a good neighbor policy and solving the open political question is the main problem that have to solve with the European Union. I think we always invite European Union to be present in our region, not to open the room for others. You know who others, and we had experience similar like in your countries. And of course, since European Union is present, especially in negotiation between Serbia and Kosovo, and helping Bosnia and Herzegovina on improve functionality, we think that is some step forward. And in other case, in other hand, you have to do your best individual base and force the application and open negotiation with the European Union, because we have no problem, as the gentleman said, why Western Balkan, why not Eastern Partnership? For us, everybody have to find his own place in European structure.
I don't know whether you should apply. What I can say on the basis of our experience is that the motivation that the accession perspective provides is extremely important. The reforms, the EU standards are very difficult to achieve, sometimes costly, also socially, economically costly. If you look at the environmental standards, I mean, our economies, including the front runners, Montenegro's economy, is not ready to adopt EU standards on the environment, I think. It's a long, costly process. Therefore, the motivation that the accession perspective provides is very important.
So, to be clear, being a member of the European Union, it is better than not being a member. And we are members since 2007 already. But if you want to ask me a good question, that question, it is not if you would join, when you would join, but another one, in which condition, both national and European, you would become a member. Because this is very much important, not to disappoint those having such high expectation concerning the accession in the European Union. I wish you all success in doing it in good conditions.
Thank you. And last 2 minutes, Michael.
So my answer to your very clear question would be, first, stick to the speech that our political objective is full membership in conformity with Article X of the treaty, which says that any European democracy can apply for membership. Okay, stick to that. Secondly, in relation to the evident political blockages in some parts of the European Union, go ahead with everything that is a valuable preparation for your future membership. This means high quality political governance. Make, by the way, in response to that question down there, your forthcoming 2020 parliamentary elections impeccable. Your last elections were not impeccable. Next ones must be impeccable. But then also, in general, all of this agenda, as I mentioned at the beginning, with your DCFTA process, you are engaged in virtually all of the accession chapters. Mature them, deepen them, sector by sector. That is an open question for negotiation between your three governments and the EU institutions as to how to move on beyond the existing DCFTA process. That's an open agenda for the next political commission. So do it, and do it with impeccable high quality, which will be observed and will contribute to the evolution of political positions.
Thank you very much, dear panelists. It was exciting. The round of applause for our panelists, please.